Bruce, you gotta unmute yourself.
I am
There we
now. I'd love to give a talk that nobody could hear, but that would not be too good. Well, as was said, I'm the president of Train Riders Northeast. Wayne Davis remains as our chairman. I've been president since January 1 of 2023, but from 1980, I think it was September of 1989 until just before January 1, 2023, I was also legal counsel, volunteer legal counsel for Train Riders. So I wasn't quite there right at the beginning when Train Riders was formed on day one, but maybe about month 4 or 5 or something like that is when I came on board. Wayne's been somebody that and for those of you who don't know, Wayne is pretty much our founding father here. And he's somebody I had known before that and his other guys as a mortgage banker, where he helped form the Mortgage Bankers Association of Maine. In any case, what I'm going to try and do here, I've got about 60 slides. We're never going to get through 60 slides. So some of these I'm going to whip through. But it's supposed to be a mini history of Train Riders, as well as the Downeaster. And so we start with this wonderful picture of death, destruction, and despair. And this is before Train Riders. 1961, Union Station came down. 1966, Grand Trunk came down. Grand Trunk. Whoops, what did I do there? Didn't want to do that. I just did something to my. There we go. And let me. One more thing here. Not that I'm completely incompetent with this stuff, but I'm not quite what I'd like to be. And I'm looking for a page that I was going to read something off of first. So let me try and get to that first. There we go. Starting first, one of the things you've got to realize is that Wayne Davis is a magical being. He seems to be able to meet important people without any great effort, or in many cases, without even any advanced planning. And as just one example there, if you ever see him, ask him about performing as part of a choir on the Ed Sullivan Show and receiving a kiss from Gina Lollobrigida. That's typical for Wayne. So throughout this, we'll be coming back to that. And so if you look at the Union Station destroyed, if you look at the picture of Union Station, you can see the tower and you see the windows at the top. Wayne was there, not that day, but Wayne was there. The guy that apparently wound the clocks, let him in periodically, and he'd go up in there and be there. But
hey, Bruce, just a quick suggestion from somebody in the crowd.
Sure.
If you could, in your PowerPoint, just go to start your slideshow, so we're not seeing like all your note screens and everything.
Oh, okay.
Up top there, slideshow.
Up top.
No, keep to the right. Up a little more. And now over across, there's slideshow in the red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 over.
I'm
Oh,
not
you went too
seeing
far.
it. Wait a minute. Slideshow in the red. 1, 2, 3. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's covered.
You just hit from current slide
Okay.
down a little bit and then back over to the left.
Okay.
There you go.
Is this working? Okay.
Much better.
Except now how do I get back to my prior slide? Oh, there we go. All right. Even though Wayne wasn't in the tower that day, he was there as the tower came down. And in fact, one of the parts of the tower practically landed at his feet. It keeled over and just started bouncing around. Some other dates that will live in infamy. 1967, after 125 years, passenger rail service to Portland ended when the Grand Trunk started having, I think it was only a weekly service during the summer. Prior to that, a couple of years earlier, most of the other trains had ended, including all the ones down to Boston. Now that left us with the Canadian train that cut across northern Maine, as I say in my PowerPoint, stopping in obscure places at obscure times, although the people in Jackman probably don't like being called obscure. It's not a place that you and I, maybe you, but not I, visit every day. That was the only rail passenger service in the state until 1994, when that closed as well. So here we are left without any passenger service. There were some glimmers of hope. 71, Amtrak was formed, but Maine wasn't included in the Amtrak system. In 1974, Governor Ken Curtis asked Amtrak to provide experimental service to Maine. Now that what he was looking at was not only regular service, but also auto train service is one of the things he was asking for from Bangor down south. But nothing happened on those. But this next slide has a dual purpose. It's to show, first of all, that Ken Curtis actually did make that request. But more importantly, do you see my cursor here when I'm going around like this? Yeah, okay. By Frank Sleeper, Press Herald writer. That was my father. And some of you have seen this before, but this is my claim to fame as being one of the oldest passenger rail families in Maine, trying to get passenger rail back before Train Riders was even formed. This was another study that was done and showed that there would be a good thing to have passenger rail in Maine, but nothing came of it. There were others as well. By the 1980s, in the last half of the 1980s, Maine was one of only 3 states that didn't have Amtrak service in the continental US. And then came the magic of Wayne. It was in 1988, Wayne was concerned. He'd just traveled on Amtrak trains between Boston and Washington and was so disgusted with the dirty conditions in the sleeping car, he wrote to Amtrak's president, Graham Claytor, to complain. And as a postscript, a PS on his letter, he said, "What do I have to do to extend the service to Portland, Maine, so I don't have to drive to Boston?" He'd traveled on trains all his life. Grandfather had worked for the railroad, but there hadn't been any, as we just mentioned, there hadn't been any regular passenger service in Maine for quite some time. Well, here comes the magic. Graham Claytor personally wrote back to Wayne. Now, if you and I wrote to the president of Amtrak then or now, if it didn't wind up in the wastebasket, it would wind up with, at best, an underling. But in Wayne's case, it was Graham himself that wrote back. Graham said, first apologized for the condition of the car, or cars, because it was both ways. And then he said, look, if you want to help, what you need to do is you need to do a survey to find out what sort of demand there is for passenger rail in Maine. And Wayne, happily obliged, gathered friends and acquaintances, placed an ad in the newspaper announcing an organizational meeting, and met with 20 others from Maine and New Hampshire in March of 1989 in Portland, as I understand it. That was the initial step in forming Train Riders Northeast, which was formally incorporated as a Maine corporation on July 12, 1989. Founding purposes, basically provide Mainers balanced transportation choices and benefits. We were bound and determined not to be known as just the train guys. We were going to be somebody that, or a group that knew that trains were not alone, but that they fit into a passenger rail or passenger transportation service, both locally and nationally. And we think we've done that pretty well. We then, in 1989, we started with 5 goals. Number one, you can see return of passenger rail service to Maine from Boston to Portland. Done. Number two, return of passenger rail service to the Maine coast from Portland to Rockland. This will be starting, according to NEPRA, this summer. It'll be Amtrak service. I don't know how much you guys have paid attention to that, but Finger Lakes was going to try and come up with a service from Brunswick to Rockland. There were some impediments to that, and in the end, they lost the equipment that they had an option to purchase because they couldn't get it going soon enough. Number three, return of passenger rail service to Maine, to inland Maine, from Portland to Bangor via Lewiston and Waterville, and also via Brunswick and Augusta. Those always have been the two competing routes for going to Bangor, and what you need, and which one were you going to go with? Both. There's a need for service on both. Those are two different populations that need that service. Number four, return of passenger rail service between Portland and New York City via Worcester, Mass. That's one of the Train Riders projects right now, is to try and get, with the east-west rail that's happening in Massachusetts, what we're trying to do is get the new rail service that's going to be coming up to stop at North Station as well as South Station. This would allow for a cross-platform change from the Downeaster onto that train, going down over to Worcester, Springfield, down to Hartford, New Haven, and on to New York City. And it's as close as we're going to get to a train from Portland to New York City, mostly because once you start, we could have had a train, tried for train straight through, but you run into crew problems and things like that. And so we were convinced to cross-platform change is the best that we could do. And then five, just general upgrading, improving, or introduction of passenger rail and freight rail service to other places in New England. The funny thing is, these were our goals in 1989. They are still our goals. We have never had to change them. I don't know whether we were blessed when we came up with those goals or what, but they were exactly what we needed, and they continue to be. They will probably add other goals as time goes on, but that's what we have, and that's what we continue to do. What did Train Riders do? Well, first, it gathered 15,000 signatures on informal petitions from Maine and New Hampshire residents for presentation to various governmental officials and bodies, asking them to explore the feasibility of a renewal service. As you might imagine, when we took those petitions to various politicians and offices, we got varied reactions. That ranged from a sort of, that's kind of interesting, up at MDOT, to I'm going to put these in the wastebasket right now, right in front of you, from then Governor Sununu, the father of the current Governor Sununu, in New Hampshire. So we kept working. We started with 21 and 19, then we got up to 800, then 1,300, and we then had a choice to make. We had engaged someone to help us out in working as an organization, and his recommendation is that we become rabble rousers, because that would attract more members, give us a lot of attention, and try and work on our own, and basically view MDOT and some of the other transportation agencies and many of the governmental officials, not maybe as the enemy, but certainly as the opposition. Or the other choice was to work within the system, go with MDOT, try and get them to work with us, and the other offices as well work with us. And we chose the latter option. It was perhaps the best choice we ever made. Because, to our surprise, very pleasant surprise, one approached, Dana Connors, who was then the MDOT commissioner, said, "Sure, I'll work with you." And he did. The next thing that happened was that Train Riders and MDOT worked together to get the Maine legislature to unanimously order a passenger ridership study and to petition George Bush, then president, for support. This is the result of the passenger ridership study, that we'd need 167,900 an estimated annual ridership of that amount, which is what they found we could get. We need a $5.2 million annual subsidy. We'd need 3 daily round trips minimum, 2.5 hours running time, service from Boston through Portland and expanded to Brunswick. Obviously, these some of these figures were a little low, 167,900. Well, we were up over 500,000 in the last fiscal year on the Downeaster. The Maine congressional delegation, we went to them. We have had, no matter who they were, I shouldn't say no matter who they were. There's been a couple of representatives who haven't been totally supportive of the passenger rail in Maine, but almost everybody else in the Maine congressional delegation has been steadily supportive of the Downeaster and of the project to get the Downeaster here. Back then, in 1989-90, the congressional delegation requested an Amtrak study, and the cost of service that was estimated was $50 million, about 30 million or so for right-of-way improvements, and about 20 million or so for equipment. At the same time, what was then the Urban Mass Transit Administration and is now the Federal Transit Administration, UMTA versus the FTA, both the same entity, determined that the service was feasible, which was really nice. And then trips down to Washington. Commissioner Connors and other MDOT officials, including Mike Murray, who eventually was the first person to head up the Downeaster service from the state of Maine side, went down to Washington on a train to confer with Mr. Claytor and other top officials. Mr. Claytor's comment was that this moved us, and I don't have it here on the slide, but we saved about 10 years worth of effort by going down there and getting the parties together. And this has become one of our big goals, is that we by ourselves cannot do anything, but we by ourselves can try and get other people to do things and get them together to try and do those things. And that's been our role. In that same time, I thought I'd taken this slide out because we already did that. We then had a situation where we needed some sort of legislative authorization to move forward with this project. We drafted what became Maine's Rail Passenger Service Act. This was citizens-initiated legislation, which, if you don't know, in Maine, if you get if you put together a petition to the legislature to adopt a piece of legislation, they have to consider, if you accompany that with, I think it's 20% of the voters that voted, registered voters equal to 20% of the voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election, which at the time was about 53,000 is what we needed. Train riders formed a political action committee. Rail Vision collected ultimately 90,000 signatures of registered Maine voters asking for passage of that act. Now, some of those didn't come in until after we'd actually submitted about 55,000. We had 55,000. We had a deadline we had to meet, so we put them in there, and then some more came in after that. July 14, 1991, the Rail Passenger Service Act becomes the first citizen-initiated legislation ever adopted by the Maine legislature. What usually happened with citizen-initiated legislation, what always happened, is that the legislature would disapprove it. This would automatically mean that the people of the state of Maine would then vote on it at the next available election. We didn't do that. We got it straight from the legislature. And John McKernan, then governor, signed off on it. We found support from both government officials and the public at large. As I said, we only got about 53,000 to file with our petition, but we ultimately got 69% more than that. That's a huge number. And you know, you look at citizen-initiated legislation today, and they spend millions of dollars on it. We spent less than $10,000. Basically, this was something that sold itself. we initially, and what you usually do with citizen initiated legislation is you have people sitting at all the polling places or as many polling places in the state as you can get them to on election day, trying to get them to sign your petition. We did that, but we only had about 21,000, and it was almost unheard of for somebody to then go out and get more signatures sufficient to place it before the legislature after election day. But we got almost all of our signatures, the vast majority of our signatures after election day. We were let into the main mall, the Bangor Mall, something that would never happen. Not only were we let into the to the main mall, but they actually helped us out with chairs and tables and things like that. And it was the kind of thing where I remember standing at the corner of one of the tables and just calling to people, would you like to help get passenger rail service back to Maine? Almost everyone came over. It was just, we were in the right place at the right time. We continue to be there, I hope. We then, to spread our fame, as it were, but most importantly, to spread the fame of the project, we did a conference entitled Building Regional Rail, A Key to Economic Recovery. That was held at the New England Center, which is no more, unfortunately, at UNH. And it attracted academics and officials, supporters, and others throughout the US. It was the first intercity passenger rail conference in memory held in Maine. Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell opened the conference. We were a real force at that point. The people knew who we were. We had connections in Washington, both at Amtrak and with the congressional delegation. Didn't hurt that George Mitchell was also a member of the law firm I worked at, but that really wasn't what got us there. What got us there was the magic of Wayne. In the midst of all this, before Wayne went down to and Train Riders went down to Washington with Dana Connors, Wayne was down there. It was after Wayne had sent in his letter, but before anything else had happened, as I understand it. And he dropped by Graham Claytor's office unannounced and got to spend an hour with Graham Claytor. I mean, just some sort of strangeness here that's going on. I've never figured it out. I never will, but that's the way things are. June, we held a second conference at UNH. Press called it a world-class event. In September of '93, we got the ICE train, which was a German train that was competing with Bombardier and others to put together something that would be used as what became the Acela. We had the ICE train come, and it was doing a national tour. It came to Portland, and the tracks behind Deering Oaks were where it sat. We had more people there than I believe any other stop on their national tour. We had lines and lines and lines of people. Not only that, but Wayne went out and got an Oompa band, since it was a German train. And that then resulted in the head of the German delegation that came with the ICE train coming over to Wayne and with tears in his eyes saying, "We've been everywhere. You're the last stop we're having." And no one has ever gotten our national type of music, except for you guys. October of '94, we sponsored a NARP meeting, National Association of Railroad Passengers, now the RPA, the Rail Passengers Association in Portland. We got people to travel up there, some of the delegates, on board a special Amtrak inspection train, which was the Talgo, which was the Spanish entry into the competition for Acela. I did not get to go on the train. I was up in Portland preparing for the meeting. But my understanding is it was one of the bumpier rides ever. We're dealing with, back then, that was Guilford Transportation Line, freight only, and was not in great shape. But it showed, again, we had a national event in Maine, in northern New England, that for passenger rail. And then finally, as far as meetings of this sort go, we got together with other groups, and in November of 1998, we had a final conference at the New England Center at UNH. And that was called a 21st Century New England Rail System Blueprint for Action, opened by Governor Shaheen of New Hampshire, national speakers, and officials from Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts. These conferences we had at the New England Center were hundreds of people. And they were some of the people that were at the forefront of passenger rail in the country and internationally. We were amazed that we could even get these people to come. We were pleased, but amazed. Then we got the funding. Costs a lot of money to bring a train. The initial estimate was 50 million by Amtrak. And of course, time goes by and the initial estimate is just that, an estimate, not a certainty. So what do? Well, Wayne testified before in 1991 before Congress seeking additional federal funding for the 403B program, which among other things provided money for new Amtrak service. And that was successful. Later on in that year, Congress did that. July, August 91, MDOT and train riders met with the heads of various federal agencies, along with Maine's congressional delegation to obtain federal funding. And I was not at those meetings either, but it was the kind of thing where you had everybody in the same room when they were basically going, well, let's see, I guess we can put this amount, we can get this amount from here and put it in this box, and we can get this amount from here and put it in that box, until finally you came up with money. November of 91, we eliminated $20 million worth of what we would have to otherwise spend when Graham Claytor offered to supply $20 million worth of equipment at no cost to the state of Maine. Now, this was an offer made to George Mitchell, to the Senate Majority Leader, so that was a very good thing to happen. June of 1992, Maine voters approved a rail bond issue, including $5.4 million in matching state funds for federal funding of the project. So we had the state match, and then we had to line up a little bit more on the federal match. Fall of 92, Gil Carmichael, a real fan of the Downeaster and train riders, was the administrator of the Federal Railroad Administration, personally came to Portland to deliver a $60,000 grant to MDOT for design work on an intermodal passenger terminal in Portland. No one was there to meet him. He had not, or no one at MDOT realized that he was coming up. When he called us on the way up, we immediately contacted MDOT, and they sat down, I don't know if it was the commissioner or Mike Murray or somebody, sent down at least someone to meet him and get the $60,000 check, not wanting to leave a federal official like that out in the cold. And again, that's where we were. We were bringing people together. We knew Gil. Gil was a friend of ours. He called us. We called MDOT. They were friends of ours, and we got them together on a very short time frame. October of 92, got a congressional appropriations, $25.5 million for right-of-way and purposes, 93, an additional $9.5 million, 94, $3.6 million, total $38.6 million appropriated for right-of-way improvements. As I indicated, you never can depend upon estimates. Later on, we got $23 million more over 2 years to fund service through to Freeport and Brunswick, although I think the money was not actually used for Freeport and Brunswick because at that point in time, we weren't going to Brunswick right away. 1990, here we have what's happening to actually get the service in place, which I call working on the railroad. 1990, test trains Amtrak sent to Maine so that it could have some way of making an estimate of how much it would cost to improve the line. May of 93, engineering and environmental assessments completed. October 93, grant application to FTA sent to the FTA for project implementation. October of 94, and this may seem a little odd to stick in here because it's not directly working on the rail, but it's a final draft of an agreement between MDOT and the Railway Labor Executives Association dealing with the labor effects of federally supported rail services. And that was distributed for review and approval at that time. That was very important. And the reason was that federally supported rail service, there was the potential that it was going to put some of the bus drivers on for Concord Trailways, what was then Concord Trailways, was going to eliminate some of their jobs and maybe some of the people in the lines in New Hampshire as well. And so it was very important to get this agreement in place. As it turned out, once we got the Downeaster here, people were not fired because of lack of work. People were added because everybody was trying to get their people out of their car, and having the train as well as the bus, and the fact that each mode was doing the same thing actually encouraged things and made things better for each mode. 95, Maine legislature, new Governor King, new MDOT Commissioner John Melrose required the formation of a passenger rail authority. And we say to be responsible for signing the final documents authorizing the startup. Well, in reality, it wasn't because of that. It was because the state of Maine was concerned that if this thing flopped, they didn't want the full faith and credit of the state of Maine on the hook for money. NEPRA had no money, so it didn't matter. We then wrote the bill with MDOT creating the NEPRA, and that passed in June of 1995. And I was on the inaugural board for that for, was it 5 years, 6 years? I can't remember. January through fall of 96, negotiations between Amtrak Guilford and NEPRA failed. This was the old bad Guilford. This was not the Pan Am as it became under newer management. This was the old bad Guilford. I still remember we were holding a press conference in the State of Maine room in City Hall in Portland to complain about why things weren't coming together on this. And David Fink Sr. with a couple of his buddies showed up unannounced and uninvited to the press conference. They stood up and they started talking. And I know Wayne was saying we should just pull them down. My advice, which I still think was great advice, was let them talk, because they sounded outrageous. They were basically never going to let passenger rail get on their line. They were responsible for safety, and passenger rail was not going to be something that could be safely run, they thought, with their freight trains. A lot of editorial cartoons came out after that showing Mr. Fink Sr. in not the best posture. And it was actually a great PR piece for us having them talk there. March of 97, all the issues that were unresolved were submitted to the Surface Transportation Board, the STB, for resolution. May of 98, STB ruling makes it possible for work to begin. However, there were still differences of opinion on 2 points: the weight of the rail, 115 versus 132 pound rail, and train speed, 60 versus 79 miles per hour. The state said 115 pound rail was fine. And Guilford wanted heavier weight rail, which we always thought was basically because that would help them on the freight side more than us, and would also probably have had a positive effect on maintenance to have a higher weight rail, but it would just have cost too much to put it in. And the train speed, well, 60 versus 79 miles per hour makes all the difference. And we thought 79 was doable. They were building it to a class 3 standard, which meant that they could go 79 miles an hour under the FRA standards. And we were going to hold them to it. Basically, we were paying them to improve their own rails to get up to level 3. And then they were not going to give us that type of service. It was just Again, somewhat outrageous. Notice I don't put outrageous in writing here. December 1998. Those issues were submitted to the STB. Everybody agreed that that was the way to go. And really, frankly, Amtrak has the ability to force its way onto the rails, but the terms of the agreement, they're overseen by the STB. January of 1999, there was a groundbreaking ceremony with the Golden Spike. Governor King, David Fink Jr. was there. I don't think Sr. was. Various federal and state officials. And it was a nice day. It was a little cold, but it was very clear. October of 99, STB issues its second decision on the line. 115-pound rail is adequate for 79 miles per hour. So we thought we were well on our way. And construction began 2000 to 2001. Boston to Portland, 78 miles of new rail. This was because, and that's not the whole line, but we were really only dealing with the line north of the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border, a little bit north of that, because the rest of the line going down into Boston was owned and operated by the MBTA, which had was already running passenger service, and we weren't improving their line. We helped out on various things later on, but this was not part of it. 100,000 new rail ties, 200,000 tons of ballast, 23 grade crossings rehabilitated. And despite this, February of 2001, Guilford Gate Rail, despite what the STB said, despite accepting all the money to improve the track, it refused to permit speeds greater than 59 miles per hour. March of 2001, train riders right in the thick of things met with Governor King seeking a resolution. But instead we went to the STB again. Train riders intervened this time as a party in those proceedings. Otherwise, prior proceedings, the first two times around, we were just sort of sitting back watching and talking to people, but not actually a party. This time around, we decided to become a party. We submitted briefs on the issue. And in June, and I'm sure it wasn't just because of us, I'm sure it was much more because of the other parties, but still, June 2001, STB issues its third decision, now supporting again the 79 mile per hour passenger train service. November 2001, construction is completed. October 2001, Governor King announces that the inaugural run, this would be pre-revenue run, would be on December 14, 2001. On that date, Governor King, Wayne, the NEPRA director, Mike Murray, many others boarded the train at Boston's North Station and went up to Maine on the inaugural run up to Portland. There was a great deal of fanfare, as you might imagine. But there were also some, and here you'll see some of that fanfare, and I'm just going quickly through those. The fanfare also included, just after we crossed the border from New Hampshire into Maine, a moose standing beside the track. Governor King's comment quickly was, cue the moose. And we all wondered, was it propped up or, but we could never figure it out. How did it actually get there? Along the way, bells were ringing. It's traditional when you had a new service, it was traditional to have all the church bells ring. Well, train riders organized that. Some places were better to be than others. Saco was not so good. Saco had a platform and a muddy parking lot. And when I say muddy, I mean muddy. Sink into the mud up to your ankles if you stepped in the wrong place muddy. We all stood on as much as we could on cardboard boxes that had been unfolded and set on top of the mud. December 15, 2001, 6:05 a.m., first revenue train left Portland for Boston. So we had the Downeaster. Now, the arrangement is NEPRA, as the state agency, contracts with Amtrak to operate the train. Amtrak then contracts with Guilford, what was then Guilford, to run over their lines. And that's pretty much the way it still is. When we started, you can see up here, the Saco station, that's actually much, much better than what there was on inaugural day. None of this concrete was there. I don't remember if the shed was there or not. No grass, just mud. Old Orchard Beach, Wells in Portland, New Hampshire stations. And almost immediately, the Downeaster was a success. Remember that 167,000? We were up around 200,000 or more in the very first year. Everybody was talking about how good we are. You can see the quote from Down East Magazine from April of 2002. Early results. This was our revenue. And you see it went down a little, it went down a bit as over time, but it did come back. And here we have the passenger service. First full year of running, instead of 167,900, 291,000. Then it went down a little, then it came back. By the way, this was our very first person who headed up the Amtrak side of things in the state of Maine. He was great. All the people we have had in Maine working for Amtrak have been just wonderful. We couldn't have asked for better people. And then we can see the average monthly boardings. Again, comments from people. It was just a wonderful thing, an immediate success. Not to say we didn't have our problems, but it was an immediate success. 15 million in 2003 business sales in Maine and New Hampshire attributed to the Downeaster services, jobs created, potential for 57 million in construction investment by 2015. And I got to tell you, that was a projection made back in 2003. And I got to tell you, I think we're well above 57 million transit-oriented development that had occurred by 2015 because of the Downeaster. Just go down to Saco. You see those mills right at the station? Those mills were empty until after the Downeaster got there. And now there are apartments and businesses. There are other places along the line. You've got, and we'll talk about this, and we'll see this later, in Brunswick, you have the station that's got businesses and meeting rooms and all sorts of things. That was built because the train was coming. Skip through these just because we're 7:50. Now, what did we do? Well, we had an onboard host program. We did that from day one, from the inaugural run until the beginning of COVID. And we hope to bring it back. But that was one of the, I think we were the second in the nation, the second Amtrak service in the nation to have that. There was somebody out in California somewhere that had started something. And now there's several programs, but we were number 2. And putting people on board changes the whole character of the train. Mr. Rodman can probably tell you about being on board as a host. And it just was a wonderful thing. Mixed reviews from some of the conductors. Some people loved us, some people hated us. But overall, the passengers loved us. And then we continue to have a program that has staffing at various stations. And then we went on to Brunswick. Always planned as part of this project. Initially, it was thought we'd have the Brunswick service within 5 years of the opening of the Downeaster in 2001. Well, that didn't happen, and so we got a little impatient. We started talking to NEPRA, MDOT, and said, we really got to get this done. And with their cooperation, we got meetings. We held meetings in Freeport, Brunswick. Had legislators, officials, business people, talked to them about the expansion, sounded them out about what they thought about it. And of course, unanimously, these people are saying yes. We had follow-up meetings where NEPRA and MDOT were represented, and then we went on. October 2008, ground was broken for the Brunswick station. Now, this is several years before the service actually started, but they did this with a little bit of a gamble, but not much, that they were going to have service there. And even if they didn't, they'd have other sources of income. Bowdoin College was interested in some of the spots too. January 2010, $25 million federal grant for upgrades to the Portland Brunswick line. 2010, what was then Pan Am Railways begins work on the line. May 2012, the platforms are completed in Freeport and Brunswick. November 1, 2012, 2 daily Downeaster trains north from Boston, from Portland to Brunswick started service. That was only a part of the trains that we had on the Downeaster service coming up from Boston, or going down to Boston. But at the time, we could only fit 2 trains there, and that had something to do with 2 things. 2013, NEPR determined that in order to permit more Downeaster trains to go north of Portland and to increase the efficiency of the whole Downeaster service, a layover facility was needed in Brunswick. A layover facility was dearly needed, and I wish I had some of the pictures. But if you ever saw some of the trains coming in the middle of the winter, they were covered in layers of ice and snow. And then you had the people who were doing the maintenance. They were outdoors on a siding in Portland, trying to cut through that ice and snow, and perhaps getting snowed upon during their maintenance work. They were horrendous conditions. So we start with NEPR saying we need the layover facility. Local opposition delayed construction. There were, and when I say local, I mean ultra local, like the people who lived right next to where the tracks were, where the layover facility was going to go. I would remind you that those tracks were at that point still zoned for, that whole area was still zoned for railroad purposes. Not only that, but in prior years, that had been the train yard for Brunswick. Didn't matter. These people had moved in next to the rail tracks and apparently never thought that anyone would ever use it for passenger rail when they moved in. They objected strenuously. And finally, it came down to the one last thing, which was a DEP permit that was required for stormwater in order to put up the building. December 24, 2014, we submitted a petition to intervene in those proceedings, which was granted by the DEP. And we worked with NEPR to play a very active role in the DEP proceedings. I got to tell you, I was the attorney who appeared in those proceedings for train riders, and I had a great deal of fun. It was wonderful. We had them on all the technical issues. If it were a vote, if it was a vote of the spectators that was important, we might have lost, but it wasn't. This was a legal proceeding where you had technical issues about whether this met technical requirements for a stormwater permit, and it did. In June of 2015, the DEP granted it. The Board of Environmental Protection upheld that on an appeal. And in November 2016, the layover facility was completed. That was part of of what was needed to get more trains up to Brunswick. We then, NEPR constructed a 4-mile passing track on the line between Portland and Brunswick, and that allowed all Downeaster trains to continue on to Brunswick starting on May 20, 2019, which is what we have now. What are we doing now? Well, we're working to establish service between North Station through Worcester, as I mentioned before. We're hoping that will happen. We initially thought that was going to be a much bigger project that we were getting involved in, until many other groups, as well as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, got together and said, we want to improve all those tracks between Boston and Springfield, which were the last set that needed to be improved. And they're doing that. And in fact, they're going on probably all the way to Albany, although I'm not quite sure how far that's gotten yet, as far as distance. I know they're all set to go through to Springfield, and I know they're going to the Commonwealth's border with New York, but I'm not entirely sure where it is on to Albany. We want to stop the removal of track from certain state-owned lines. I know that I'm sure you probably are somewhat aware that there are state-owned lines in Maine. We have the Mountain Division between Portland and up through to the New Hampshire border near Freiburg. We have the lower road from Brunswick to Augusta. We have the road between what used to be the St. Lawrence and Atlantic line between Portland and Lewiston Auburn area. All three of those have not had passenger rail service for quite a long time, and all three of those have not had freight service for a greater or longer period of time. The state of well, I shouldn't say state of Maine. The trail lobby a couple of years ago was able to get a legislation to enact legislation allowing or requiring MDOT to review the use of state-owned rail lines where a petition had been filed by any governmental entity along the line. And what would happen then is under that legislation, the MDOT, the commissioner, would appoint a commission, RUAC, Rail Use, I can never remember what the RAC stands for. And that commission would make a recommendation to MDOT and the commissioner as to whether as to what use the rail line should be put to. Essentially, that came down to, are the trail people going to get the rail ripped out of the ground and have just a trail on one or more of those lines? Are they going to have a trail there but leave the rail in place? Or is nothing going to be done? We've gone through the RUAC process for the Mountain Division. The recommendation there was that the line be torn up and that a trail be put in place. The three RUACs that have been appointed, all three of them to a greater or lesser degree have had some substantial issues as far as train riders is concerned. It turns out that MDOT, the commissioner, appoints people to each RUAC, but he basically goes to the municipalities along the line and says, give me some recommendations as to who you want on there, and I'll add some more of my own, and that's what we'll have. The legislation said there would be one trail proponent and one rail proponent on each of these RUACs. What then happened was that the people who jumped up and down at the municipal level and said we wanted to be on the RUACs were trail people, which meant that the municipalities almost always recommended trail people. So that in most instances, on the Mountain Division, there was only one trail proponent, and there were like 12 or 13 trail proponents. So you can guess the vote was, I believe, 12 to 1 to rip up the rail there. That went through the legislature in the last session, and despite a great fight, the legislature, first of all, the commissioner did follow the recommendation, sent it, and then had to get it approved by the legislature. Legislature said fine. And so legislation was passed to rip up the Mountain Division. They don't have any funding in place yet, so there's a little bit of respite, but it could happen soon, could happen later, don't know. But the Mountain Division is just this far from being ripped up. This is despite the fact that the Conway Scenic appeared at the hearings on that line and said, we'd like to have that track improved, and then we'd run the service under a long-term lease with the state of Maine, and at no additional cost after the improvement of the rail. But that was not to be. The line, I'm not sure what's happening here, but let's see here. Uh-oh. Somewhere along the line here. we've lost something. In any case, the RUAC decision on the line between Portland and Lewiston, Auburn, St. Lawrence and Atlantic line. Oh, by the way, the Amtrak person here, whose name I couldn't quite remember, and I should because he's a great guy, Victor Salemi. And he's still living here in Maine. The line, boy, this is not good. I think I'm going to have to leave it at this. The line between Portland and Lewiston, Auburn, the RUAC was a split decision. We did have several people from the municipalities, including Portland, who voted against ripping up the rail. But it was, and it came to, a split vote where and several people, of the members abstained. So there was no actual majority of the whole RUAC that voted in favor of ripping up the rail. As a result, the commissioner did not yet take that to the legislature. Could happen, but it hasn't happened yet. And I guess the reason we don't have any more is because I didn't have any more slides. Anyway, so that's happening. On the lower road between Brunswick and Augusta, it was again a split vote. By far the majority, and I was on that RUAC. By far the majority, however, voted to rip up the track. That's before the commissioner. The commissioner has not decided what to, or at least not officially decided whether he wants to adopt the RUAC recommendation or not. So that's it. And I will, if I can figure out how to get rid of me. Oh yeah, stop share. You now no longer have to look at my wonderful slides, just my pretty face. And if there's any questions.
Well, Bruce, just to start, I want to thank you for presenting to us tonight. One question that had come up in the chat early on, you mentioned that Maine was one of 3 states without Amtrak service. Somebody adeptly figured probably New Hampshire was the second, and we're
no, wrong. That was not it.
Oh.
They did have one service, and they still do.
That's right, the Vermonter.
The Vermonter, and no, if you're looking for who the two were there guesses as to what the other 2 were?
Hawaii and Alaska?
No, because this was continental. I said the continental United States, contiguous states. It was Oklahoma and South Dakota. So those were the 2. And South Dakota still doesn't have it. I don't know about, I mean, Oklahoma does. I don't know if anybody else has lost service since then that and doesn't have any service. There probably is. I'm not sure.
Bruce, I live in Bodenham on the lower road.
Yeah.
What is the next step on that? And when is it going to happen? Because I know the legislature pretty well around here, and I want to speak to her about it.
Yeah. Right now we're waiting for the commissioner to issue a formal decision as to whether he is going to adopt the RUAC recommendation that the line be torn, the majority recommendation the line be torn up. I did a rebuttal to that, and that was submitted by the 3 of us who were in the minority. And if you want me to, I can arrange to have that sent to you. If I can send it to Eric or somebody, and you can send it on to you.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd really appreciate that, because I'd like to get a little bit up on what's the technical arguments are before I go approach the rep.
And from what I see on the screen here, it's the faceless Kevin Twine. Is that what we've got?
Faceless? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, there he is. Off and
Did I
on.
get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. Okay. I'll send it to Eric.
All right, great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and just so you know, the reason why the trail people are fighting so hard to rip up the rails rather than having rail with trail is that it costs them about twice as much to put in a trail if the rail is still there. Because with the rail gone, they've got the straight and narrow and they just got to go. Particularly on some portions of the lower road, in that section of the lower road, they had to blast through rocks, so there's not much space on either side of the track. And you'd have to go well off the track line to have a trail go in if you left the rail there. Not that that should mean that you should tear up the track, which is about as short-sighted as I can think, particularly on the line. The absolute, my absolute minimum was that we retain the lower road there, because, you know, it's one of the routes to Bangor. It goes through our state capital. And last but not least, what does that mean for the Brunswick service and on to Rockland? The Brunswick service will be a stub end. It won't have any connections to anything.
You're preaching to the converted here.
I know.
I was wondering if I could chime in. Two really quick things. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for all that you did to get the Downeaster running, because I'm a student at the University of New Hampshire and I don't have a car. So yeah.
Yes.
So
When we
I
first
have
started, but just so you know, when we first started the service, your stop was only a weekend stop. And because nobody thought that college students would want to go anywhere except on the weekends. So
people start drinking on Thursdays.
quickly, yeah. So long as they can crawl on and off on the weekends, we figured they were I shouldn't say we, but that changed within a year of the Downeaster starting. But go ahead.
But my second thing, and I remember you and I had quite a bit of email correspondence last year, related to the Mountain Division, is just like what remains, if anything, going forwards, or is it just kind of, are we just screwed?
Well, yeah, there is one thing that MDOT has not done that it's required to do, and it sort of got lost in the shuffle here. Not only is it required to go through this RUAC process before removing rail, it's also required to do an economic analysis and reach a conclusion that there will be no adverse economic effect from the removal of the train. They have not done that. If they tried tomorrow to rip up the track, there is, you know, as an attorney, I'll say there's the potential of going to a court and having them stop until they do that. That's just a delaying tactic. It doesn't get you anywhere in the long run. But if you had something that might work, then it would wind up, you know, delaying things until you could get things in place. Now, what could be ultimately done? The one thing that could ultimately be done is if somebody were willing to if we got a groundswell of support for having a rail line, an operational rail line on the Mountain Division, freight and or passenger, and there was a source of funding for improving that line. And that's number two. Number one, not necessarily easy, but not too hard. Number two, getting the funding could be done, but you know, the problem is there's a lot of federal funds out there, but it's all on a competitive basis. And it, you know, as MDOT kept reminding us during all of the hearings on the Mountain Division, the Mountain Division is a hard sell in competition with some other rail lines that want to be improved.
Hey,
I guess
Bruce.
we'll have to see then.
Bruce, I've heard reports that they're going to move the Portland station to closer to downtown Portland. Did you hear anything about that?
Oh, I've heard quite a bit about that. I've heard quite a bit about that for about 6 years now.
Okay.
NEPRA, first of all, when the Downeaster was first started, train riders forcefully recommended that any station be on the main line. Well, now we've got one that's not on the main line, and twice, at least once a day, and maybe even twice, there is the northbound and southbound trains meet at the Portland station, and you should see how long it takes those trains to go back and forth, so that one goes in to the station, then backs out, then the other goes in and backs out, and one has to wait. It just is awful. There's one at around 6:30 at night, and you know, one of those meets, and you know, the trains are in each direction are only scheduled to be in about 10 to 15 minutes apart. And if one of them is a little late, it just doesn't work. It takes like 20 minutes. It adds 20 minutes to the train travel time because of that. So having said all that as preamble, yes. NEPRA and MDOT have been looking to put a station right on the main line in Portland, probably off of on St. John Street. It would not be where the old railroad buildings are, and unfortunately, it does not entail tearing down that wonderful strip mall that took the place of Union Station.
Right.
There is a site that's been selected, I think. Unfortunately, this is being done, and I think it's just delay. And I'm not entirely privy to exactly what's happening there, but my suspicions are this is an MDOT project, not a NEPRA project.
Okay.
MDOT's doing a lot of things, and this station may not be the top of its list of things to do.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. By the way, there's also a station that's going to be going up. I say with more confidence that in the next few years, there'll be a station in West Falmouth, which is great because that's less than a mile from my house.
Oh, nice.
Anything else? Well, thank you.
Yes,
Appreciate
Bruce.
it.
Oh, go ahead, Dave. Is this your shameless plug again, Dave?
No, I'm not gonna do that. You can find it on our website. No. I have sort of a more mundane question. Train 683, excuse me a second. Cooking dinner here. Train 683 is apparently not stopping at Woburn. And it appears to be the only down Easter
Yeah.
train that is bypassing it. What's going on there?
There's work being done there when it's not, and I don't know what the details are, and I don't know why it would just be then, but apparently it's just around the time that 683 goes through, but that's all I know.
Yeah, because it's just odd that, it comes through Andover. I see it many days a week, and just a few minutes late going up to Haverhill, and and nothing else that operates through Woburn and Anderson seems to be affected. So it just kind of
well, let me see if the schedule might tell me something. And then maybe there's a gap of time there. I don't know.
The only thing I found is when you go to check train times, it says it doesn't operate there, and if you try to buy a ticket,
no,
doesn't work.
Right. All I can tell you is it's supposedly some sort of track or maintenance work or something that's ongoing. Why it's just then, I have no idea.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
See you Thursday, Dave.
That's tomorrow, Al.
That's right.
Just so everybody will know, if it wasn't for the
I had a
vision-
job shadow with you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
If it wasn't for the- if it wasn't for the vision of Wayne Davis with the support of the speaker, we just had Bruce, who gave him all the legal advice, we would not have a train. So those two guys deserve a lot of credit, just to let you all know. I want to pat them on the back.
Says the board member of Train Riders Northeast,
Right, right.
who we've exiled to Florida for reasons that should be obvious to all.
Right, like them up in the summer.
Well, Bruce, on behalf of the club, I want to thank you for presenting to us tonight. Great presentation on the history of train riders and the Downeaster service. So thank you very much on behalf of the club. Just a reminder, everyone, next month is, in addition to the membership meeting, our annual business meeting. So please be there and represent yourself and your club. And with that, I hope everybody has a great evening.
Thank you. And thank you, Bruce. Very, very informative presentation. Thank you.